Well, hello everybody, video 3, and I've only started this day just in personal stuff, and so much keeps coming forward. I want to do this video hopefully in my rural remote location. This goes out without a hitch, but I guess we'll see. Never know, sometimes it doesn't work out that way. See, people are logging on. I want to do this video deeply disturbed by Roseanne Archibald and several indigenous leaders have always had this problem, always, forever and a day. Whether you classify yourself as elected leadership or you classify yourself traditional leadership, it's all about the truth of the world as it really is. Anyone can go look at monumental works I've done in the highest institutions in the world, one of which is the nature of international law as it really is. That went all the way to Oxford. It's gone all over the world. It's been well received by many of the leading nations in the world, many world leaders. It's truly a monumentous amount of works that I've completed. And people are learning. I love learning. It's all about knowledge is power, personally empowering people. I have a real serious problem with Roseanne Archibald, National Chief. And people can say, "You're white, shut up, what do you know?" Well, folks, I'm going to say this and say this clearly. Traditional laws and this idea that things are traditional. I'm going to tell you right now, all First Peoples and all Canadians, there is nothing traditional about National Chief, the AFN. We can go back through all of it in its history. These are post-Indian Act creations. Inside the colonial system, these same individuals profess to want to be rid of. I have to say this and I have to get it off, and it has to be known to everybody. Everybody. All Canadians, regardless of defined class. All First Peoples, regardless of Indian, Métis, or Inuit. All peoples inside the UN state of Canada. There is not ever going to be a Turtle Island ever again. Anyone ever trying to tell you that or revert governing systems back to a time pre-World War II and the new world order of things since 1945 is lying to you. Is lying to you. And in fact, Canada itself, in its absolute colonial design, is an about-face of that decision made post-1945, the victorious allies of World War II, the United Nations. And in its founding document that every country in this world today, meaning all peoples of the world today, you accept that document or you're gone. You're gone in any legal narrative or any way, shape, or form, any supports going forward. There are a number of nations out there that have no status, are constantly under the thumb of a ruling elite, crushing peoples all over this world, and they're there because they refuse to accept that Charter of the United Nations. Like it, hate it, or not. That is where the world went. There was a Crown Colonial War. In fact, 2 of those wars, World War I, World War II. Out of that, there were victorious countries who no longer wished to participate in that colonial system. In fact, a promise of all nations of this world was never again. I'm sorry, First Peoples, there's no ever going back to what that world was before 1945. Never ever going to be anyone trying to sell a half-colonial narrative. Indigenous or Aboriginal leaders coming forward, such leaders like Roseanne Archibald saying, well, I want traditional laws, but I want to ignore the rules-based system of today. I want to make my own version of Canada. I'm going to call it Turtle Island according to my beliefs that aren't of my peoples in any real history. None whatsoever. Folks, there's not even such a thing as national chief before the 70s. I'm sorry, there isn't. Show me a history. Which brings me to the notion that there is only one First Peoples from all of North America, all the way across the Arctic Ocean into Russia and all the way through Siberia. Anyone who wants to challenge this notion, I don't care what grandiose sense of self-definition you say, I'm National Chief or I'm Grand Chief of this area. All First Peoples of North America right through to Siberia and all of the Arctic are all of the original First Peoples. Joined by a land bridge, folks. All joined by a land bridge, went through to South America. Different changes happened as Central America became isolated at points in history. You can look this all up. You can go look at the history of actual ice ages and melts that overlap these people in their history. They are the First Peoples crossing a land bridge, isolated at one point, and then further isolated between South America, North America, making major distinctions. This never really happened all the way to Russia, from what is Russia now today, all the way down to basically Mexico. All one peoples. Anyone trying to say otherwise is not being honest with you. They're not even being honest with themselves. That governing system is now a part of the United States of America. It has been enshrined and in place since absolutely 1975. And that system is absolutely for 566 nations. Did you hear me? There are 566 separate and distinct nations in the United States of America. For all the radicals and lunatics trying to tell you there's no such thing as a nation inside a nation, I can promise you, in the United States of America today, there are defined legally 566 distinct, separate, legal nations inside what is the United States of America. These 566 separate legal nations meaning their own governing peoples, are a nation within the United States of America. Basically, a United Kingdom. 567 countries in one. And of course, one of those nations is the United States of America. In 35 of those states reside separately and independently self-governing are 566 nations with more than 555 separate and distinct constitutions of governance, traditional governance, accepting the shared responsibility with the federal government. That's it. That's all she wrote. That's the United States of America. That is traditional governance for 566 separate legal nations within a nation. completely self-governing, independent of the federal and states which they reside in. In fact, controlling their own lands, controlling their own laws, in shared interest with the United States, in shared international treaty, giving that power to the United States, but otherwise all domestic affairs are inside those nations. Sure, they overlap and share policing in treaty and many other treaties made even with Canada. Even with Canada. United States of America and these 566 nations can't change how Canada operates. That's not what was agreed to in World War II. For all states, there is never going to be a Turtle Island. Now, there can be a Canada with separate nations, and because Canada has so many, upwards of over 2,000, quite possibly a lot more, 2,000 nations within a nation. But that requires full settlement of the claims, just like the United States of America. It means self-government, absolutely just like the United States of America. And it means self-determination, just like the United States of America. That is a truth, and that is traditional governance for the First Peoples, i.e. the American Indian in the United States of America. And you see this with the Inuk of Alaska, the Arctic peoples, who are also self-governing American Indians in the Arctic Council. They have their own seat, absolutely. A separate, distinct nation within a nation. This is not even remotely close to the same entirely for Canada. Not even close. We have a terrible Indian Act, forever and a day, from a governing system that no longer exists. We have people like Russ DeBio, who doesn't want to acknowledge anything past 1951. Touches on some stuff, but doesn't go into any details. No solutions. Roseanne Archibald, Governor General Mary Simon, doesn't matter. They all embrace the crown. They renounce colonialism, but then they say their traditional form of governance is their own colonialism inside a colonial system. That is not traditional Indian governance. It's not traditional Inuit Arctic governance. It's not. It's not. You want to see traditional First Peoples governance, go to the United States of America. Anyone telling you anything else outside of this is a liar or a half-truth teller. They like all the narratives to back up their position, but they like to slice out anything that points to real true self-government, self-determination in full settlement of the claims. Real traditional First Peoples governance. Again, go show me traditional First Peoples governance where National Chief exists. Show me where AFN or Brotherhood or any of the rest of it exists. Answer is none. These are all crafts. And some of them, I get it, in opposition to the Crown colonial system, but only in an attempt to create your own Crown system within that system. Wrong. There's never going to be a Turtle Island. I want to say this again. In international binding law, the UN and state of Canada is being created. It's done, signed, sealed, certified. Nobody has any authority in this world to redesign that in their own vision or tear it apart or chop it up without being granted that through a set system of real laws on the international stage. Your government will try to create its own laws to get you out of it, its own system, obviously through the crown, to get out of that world, but it doesn't work. And it does take all of you to go there. It does take all of you to get that job done. There's lots of ways to do it. I like the legal path. Some people like the violent path, but as seen time and time again, Canadians and Canadian First Peoples can't get there. They can't. So instead of falling on your face 2 million times over and always falling back in line with the crown, let's start telling the truth. Let's follow the legal path in the system available today that can absolutely get the job done. Let's cut the shit. Stop with all the half-truths, i.e. Mary Simon and absolutely National Chief Roseanne Archibald. Those are half-truths to really manipulative lies that really stink and smell like the same dirty shit as the government of Canada in its definition and absolutely constitutional written law. I've told everybody many, many times all about the Indian Act, the highest law, absolutely, of all the First Peoples. There's an Arctic Council, a whole separate system imposed by the Allies of World War II. And there's also all kinds of changes post-1951 that have been made to that Indian Act. And even when the Canadian government transfers the powers under Aboriginal or Indigenous to the provinces whom have zero codified constitutions, meaning no rules of governance, no how to govern, and absolutely no accountability. They transfer it there where they let autocrats continue on all the colonial abuses, including a lot of First People themselves inside the governing system imposed upon them, grabbed by them, and a lot of them want to continue that going forward. A system that's in violation of the Allies of World War II. We can never go back in history. There is no governance going forward for Turtle Island in any narratives called traditional that violates the Charter of the UN. You will be met with world-class resistance by powerful nations that will impose upon you. They will force you. And if you don't believe it, there's a whole number of nations right now with sanctions, military intervention, and much, much worse. Every day of the week, you can watch it. They're all over the place. If you follow the United Nations Security Council, you will watch every month as they deliberate and change and impose things on all these countries throughout the world. Everyone's watching Ukraine these days, but I can tell you there's 13 other nations that it's been going on and on and on. Another 20-some more than that just under sanctions and military interventions, never mind massive military actions. People have to look at the world as it really is, operate the system as it really is. That's all I'm selling. That's all I'm teaching, which isn't selling. That's all I'm telling people, giving people knowledge for their own power. I'm not interested in lunatic narratives or make-believe lands or somehow we're going to write a system that is looking a lot like the system we're in right now and we're going to get away with that, or we're going to sell that to First Peoples or Canadian citizens. No. We sell you the truth, the power to get the system the right way, as was intended by the Allies of World War II, legally and accepted by the Allies of World War II. Again, if you ever want to know what traditional Indian governance looks like, go to the United States of America. There are 566 separate and distinct nations in the United States of America. Completely self-governing, self-determining, in full settlement of the claims. Those are their resources, their systems, their laws, and they have constitutions themselves outlining all that. written out how they govern. That's their traditional governance. They are nations within a nation. And yes, they overlap in military. Yes, they overlap in police. And yes, they overlap in many, many things through the federal and sometimes international. But really, you never hear much about any of them because they're very, very happy and self-determining and going about their business, operating just fine inside the United States of America. A heck of a lot better than all of Canada in all its entirety. The First Peoples are subjugated here in an inhumane Indian Act that governs all of everything about their system. Where you find National Chief, you find Governor General Mary Simon, all the Lieutenant Governors, the whole AFN, and many, many more. Some through Aboriginal design, which is horseshit. Some through now Indigenous design, which is all horseshit. Doesn't mean nothing. It's just another thieving amount of people taking money for themselves. Sorry. I didn't make this gross system. This is imposed from the Crown of Canada. What is the Crown of Canada? There's two. There's a federal crown and each province and territorial crown. And they utilize the Indian Act to destroy the First Peoples every chance those two subgroups get. There is no United Kingdom. There isn't the royal family administering anything. If you don't believe me, go file a lawsuit against Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II like I did, and you'll find out you've just met the provincial crown. The provincial government shows up. If the Supreme Court of Canada, and you can afford it, you file in the Supreme Court of Canada against Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, you will find the federal government will show up to defend the case. If the Prime Minister allows the Supreme Court of Canada to even hear your case, he doesn't have to, or she wouldn't have to. They can even tell the justices they can hear it, but they won't rule on it. Or they can hear it, but they can't provide remedy. Or this is the remedy you will provide. King's Court, folks. Held, controlled by the federal government, i.e. the King of Canada, whomever you've elected Prime Minister. Ultimately, it all goes in super autocratic, highly executive power to one Prime Minister. And all the premiers will never give any division of powers in any real constitutionalism, hence your civil rights, your human rights, absolutely all your property rights. First Nations, do you see the problem there? You don't have any property rights. Do you see? Do you get it now? Subject to the federal government. Just read your Indian Act. But property rights are provincial. Where's your provincial division of powers? Oh, you're not human beings. You're savages. Oh, yeah, the Indian Act. I forgot to go through that part. You're not human beings. You don't get any property rights. You get a federal government, a divine ruler who tells you savages how it's going to be. I'm sorry. I didn't write any of this. I certainly didn't create it. I only share the truth of how it really is. A lot of these folks, great talkers, oh, they read, but then they stop. Oh, no, I don't like that new world because I like all these parts of the old world order. I want that power for myself. Let's not talk about certain years. Let's not continue forward. Hey, you know that major war we had, World War II, and never again, and the new rules-based system that gives absolute sovereignty to all peoples and real freedom and equality of the person for the first time in world history. Yeah, I don't really want to look at that. Yeah, that doesn't suit my narrative. Okay, well, what the fuck are you? Right? I keep going through this more and more with people, and then I gotta say, what is your narrative? What is it you want to do? You just want to be another dictator? Because the world is chock-loaded with those. The world's chock-loaded with those. If you want real self-determination, self-government, and settlement of the claims, you want real traditional governance, look no further than the United States of America. Look at the American Indians. Again, I'm going to say it. 566 separate nations within a nation. They have nation status. Kind of like what Quebec is about to get through UNDRIP and indigenous language that they're converting into the Indian Act peoples. They're going to make French people indigenous. Probably a nation within a nation. And they're using all the Indians, Métis, and Inuit to get it while they eradicate you. That's your Canada. Totally inhumane, totally wrong, and a complete violation of the UN Charter and everything it represents since 1945, since the victorious Allies won World War II. It is the reason why there is no royal family or crown in Canada, and why any court case at the highest provincial court or highest federal Supreme Court of Canada will never ever draw any royal family member here. You only take on the federal crown or the provincial crown. Crowns stolen in 1952 upon the death of King George VI. It's why all First Peoples stop with the Indian Act at 1951. It's why there's no amendments to the Indian Act 1951. Because the federal and provincial government stole it, created two crowns out of it, split the crown in two, gave the provincial crown power, and they're doing all the human rights violations against the First People under the provincial crown, because everybody looks that the federal government governs over the First Peoples. No one looks to the province. They don't see the massive human rights violations. Sneaky, right? Very sneaky. But yet you don't hear all these experts and indigenous or aboriginal leaders bringing any of this forward for you. Gotta ask yourself, why don't they bring it forward? Because it's called half-truths or full-blown lies. They tell you the truth in enough narrative so they get what they want, but not the whole truth for all of you, the people, you the traditional peoples, or you the Canadian citizens. Everybody does it. Federal and provincial governments have been doing it since 1952. They stole the crown, they utilized the crown, and yet, with the removal of that British Empire and that check and balance that now belongs fully to your elected government or appointed underneath them by them, they have the check crown power that they own and they administer, which means it's pure autocracy, worse than even having the British Empire there under the crown check and balance. Sick, sad, gross. It's way worse than communism, and it's the worst civil law socialist system because it's got a divinity of the politicians and a divinity of all those in the leadership underneath the Indian Act who claim that somehow they're traditional. Like you said, go look at the history of National Chief, created in the early 70s. Traditional? There ain't fucking nothing traditional about that. That's a crown craft. Oh, we want to ruin the crown, but only the crown parts we don't like. We want to assimilate the crown for ourselves. That's how we determine what's traditional. Folks, you can't give divinity of governance to anybody. It needs to be a will of the people. You need to codify rules of governance, how to govern, and accountability in a constitution. Now, for First Peoples, you want to do that through song and the act of smudge? Go for it. Have a matching written law. Have a whole bunch of languages to back it up for every song you create, every enactment you make. That's how you do it. That's traditional. Not the bullshit everyone's trying to sell you. Half-truths or full-blown lies. It bothers me. It's sick. It's wrong. It's always been wrong. And, yeah, so what? I'm a white guy. Who cares? That is the truth. Credible, verifiable, and 100% real. You ever want to know? Just go look up the United States of America. Look up 566 nations in the United States of America. There you will find the truth. All of which are governed by their own constitutions. Many shared, but there are 155 separate legal constitutions. Enacted, accepted, implemented by the United States of America. All those lands belong absolutely to those people. They're even getting lands back. Land back. All the time. Little by little. Reclaiming lands all the time. Just had a monumental one in Minnesota. That's my video. Share, share, share. Those who don't like it, tough titty.